Hey everybody. So I know we've gone through a lot. We have a couple of weeks to get through these videos, and that's why I'm kind of spreading them out and getting you as much information as I can. So, take these in small doses. Um, so what I wanted to talk about next is the way you set up your shots and your composition and working a little bit with cameras. So let's just jump in here and talk about that. So, I have my scene set up. Before we jump in here and do very much, though, let's just talk about the different types of shots. So, I'm sure you've heard this in many different lectures, but we're going to go over it again anyway. So, I'll just pull in some pictures from Pixabay, these are free, public, or not public domain, royalty-free images. So there's a lot of different kinds of shots, and everybody has names for them. But really, I think people get hung up on like, is that a medium shot, or is that a close-up, or is that a what? Like, there's not a real set definition. It's about a feeling, right? It's about like what you're trying to establish or what you're trying to show in that shot, right? So these first few that we're going to look at, we call establishing shots. This shot is um, telling us something about the environment, right? About the world we're going into. Right? If you start off a film and this is the first scene that we fade into, we're like, oh, cool, we're in a city. I can't remember which specific city this one is, um, but it's a big one, right? There's some skyscrapers out there, like, and all this has done is sort of put you in the mood for this is what I'm getting ready to get into. This is the world. This is a shot that's really far away from any humans, right? I'm sure there's some down there, like they're driving those cars, they're walking on the streets, but this doesn't tell you very much about a person. This tells you more about a place, right? The same with this establishing shot. It's telling you about a place, a town or a village, street at night. Maybe this is going to be a little um, of a creepier or darker story. This feels like something out of a Neil Gaiman book or something. You got these cobblestones, meaning that this isn't an extremely modern city. This town has like culture. Not a city, but a town. Has like an old heritage and culture that's been there for a while, right? Um, and so just this shot is establishing something about the world we're getting ready to get into, right? The story is going to unfold in. Even something like this, even though there are people in it, this is establishing our location, our placement, our place of where the story is going to take place, unfold. This is a back line of a restaurant, and it's apparently a relatively nice restaurant. Like everybody is, this isn't the back line of McDonald's. This is somewhere you would go in, sit down, and eat. Back when that was something that used to happen. Um, so all of these are types of establishing shots because we are establishing the environment, and even though there are people in this shot, this shot isn't necessarily about the people. This is about the location, right? The world that we're getting into. So something like this, though, although a lot of the similar elements of the previous shot, right? We got some people with their back turned to us. Um, this one is a little bit more about the people, right? Because the environment is sort of tying into these people, right? They're traveling, obviously. They seem lost. Um, the world isn't really giving us very much information, and so as we get into this, this is a little bit more, just a little bit more about how the people in this shot relate to that environment, right? So we would call this a long shot because this is about the people. Um, it's long because like we're seeing a lot of environment, and the way that I like to think of these shots is the further away you are from the people, the more it is about, or away from the subject of the shot, the more it is about the environment. The closer you get to the people, the more that shot is about the person, right? It's like in like the physical distance and the emotional distance are both very similar. right? So as we get a little closer, right? Well, this is about the environment they're in as well. Like we get a lot of information about the environment, but what it also is about is this relationship of two people, right? It's very cute. They're holding hands, um, but we're still a little bit distanced from them, right? This shot isn't necessarily about how uh, the little girl is, thinking about what she wants for dinner or something, right? This is about this relationship in this world, right? Again, as we get a little bit closer, the shots become less about the environment, even if the environment is pretty and uh, um, has relevance to the shot, right? This shot is more about this person, right? It starts to become more intimate, a little bit more emotionally engaging, right? It's undeniable that even though this shot has a bunch of trees in it, this shot is not about trees. This shot is about this person, this girl. Um, as we get, and we would call this sort of like a medium long shot. It's not a full shot because we don't see her feet. It's not a medium shot that would usually cut you off somewhere around the belt. This is we would just say this is medium long. And again, these names aren't necessarily the important part. The important part is what sort of our distance from the character. It's a quick way to describe it from someone or for someone. But really, the importance in terms of cinematography and composition is what is this shot about? And this shot is obviously about a person, right? It's very engaging because she's staring directly at the camera, right, which isn't always the case, or directly past the camera, something behind the camera. But we're close to her line of sight, so it feels like this has something that is um, like we're supposed to be connecting with her on an emotional level in this shot, right? Now, if she were looking off into space, right, or over into the trees, the connection is between her and the trees, right? Like what this is about is her really being engaged in that location that she is in, right? She is, she's becoming one with nature or whatever. This is where it's so directly like looking at us. This makes us feel, when somebody like locks eyes with you, it feels very emotionally engaging. Um, so we get that, and because we're a little closer, it feels a little bit more personal, right? Which it gets even more so if we get even closer, right? This is confrontational almost, like partially the look on her face, and even though we are able to see environmental elements, like it looks like maybe on a near an island or at a lake or something. This is obviously about her, and since we're so close, it is obviously about what is going on in her head, right? The direct line of sight is again very engaging, and the look on her face, it isn't a "yay, I'm happy to see you." It's very like this feels like you've just made her mad, right? And when you look at a shot like this, because we're so close, it's impossible to not start thinking about what is in this person's head, what's going on in this person's head, right? Um, More so than what is going on in the world around her. So again, the closer we get, the more it's less about the environment and the more it's about the person, about the like the mental or emotional closeness. As we start getting in, and this we would probably call like a medium close shot, or maybe a head shot or something like that. We get something like this. This is a close up, right? Where a close up, really, you're even trimming off a little bit of the head, but it just means we're really close, right? And it is, again, undeniable that what this is about is this person. And because we're so close, because you only ever get this close to people you are um, uh, connected to in some way, this feels very personal, right? This feels like something about, like you wouldn't get this close to a person unless you were um, engaging with them in an emotional way, right? This is a serious conversation you're having with somebody. She's telling you a secret. She's you know, there's like all of those things are the only times you get that close to a person. So we get really close to a person, and the only thing you can think about in this shot is what is happening in her head, right? This is not about eyeballs, right? This shot is not about eyebrows or any of that. All of this is about what is going on in her mind, right? And I think that we all sort of feel that and that gut reaction of, if we step back to here, that this is not necessarily, like, this shot just doesn't feel like it's about what's going on in any of these people's minds. This feels like a place shot. This is about locations. And as we step closer, it's more and more about what's going on in that person's head, right? So the closer we are physically to these elements, the closer we are to, without sounding too like philosophical about this, like the closer we are to like the nature of that thing's purpose, right? So like we're using people here as an example, but with our cars, right? If I get really close on a shot of the headlight, like we talked about earlier, and we see that headlight rattling, right? And the headlight has a crack in it, what that is about is this car is barely holding it together, right? It's old, it's you know, going fast, but it's like it's just kind of duct taped together, right? Whereas if we had a shot that was really far away, that's not, you know, that's more about the car is in this place going fast, right? So it's the closer we get to it, it's more about the nature of that thing. Now you'll see a lot in editing to where we cut away from a person or we cut away from our subject to a part of that subject, right? So for example, we may cut away from, you know, people talking to a picture like this, right? And I think that when you see a shot like this, you realize that this shot is not about fingers, right? Like this is not about the physical thing we are seeing. This is about something that cannot be seen, right? This is about an idea, right? This is about relationships, an old hand, a young hand. Like we automatically draw these connections. Are they related? Is this a grandparent and a grandchild? Like this is about ideas. This is about feelings, about things that are not tangible. This is not about roads or chewing gum or feet. This is about frustration, right? And the same as this is not about feet or sandals or toenails. This is about moving. This is about a journey, right? And all of those other elements add to it, right? These aren't necessarily the best walking shoes, so maybe this is a casual journey, right? Maybe this is a person, you know, if we cut away from a shot of somebody like, you know, they've just survived a plane crash in the forest, and then we cut to this shot, it's obviously about a journey in ill-equipped shoes for that journey, right? This is not the thing you want to be hiking through the mountains in, right? So all of these shots mean more than the literal subject matter, right? I think that that's important to recognize when you are composing your own shots. Okay, so let's look at some stuff that we want to consider when doing our shots in Maya. So my camera is locked. I've put my cars in a couple locations. I have a couple of elements here, right? And we want to think about a couple of things, primarily with the location of our camera. So I'm going to unlock our camera and talk about what this ends up doing to our camera, right? So we want to place our camera in an area that shows us best what it is we're trying to convey with that shot. Every shot should have a meaning, a reason for being there. It can't just be I randomly put some stuff there. You need to be able to say it in a sentence. What is the purpose of this shot? because if you can't come up with one, it maybe needs to be thrown away. So let's say the purpose of this shot is to reiterate that, or to establish that there is the location we're at and that there's a chase going on in that location, right? So for that shot, I may want to have something like this as our starting shot, right? Where we are off in the distance, and then we're seeing a lot of the environment. The actual moving subjects are really small. This is more about the world. Versus another shot later, if I want to establish green car is being chased by red car, and green car is our hero, right? Then I want to get in here kind of close or closer on green car, and maybe make red car a little further away, right? So maybe this is the shot that I would be looking at. Now it still tells us a little bit about the world where they're being chased, right? But this maybe isn't. A lot of times people want to start with an establishing shot to say this is the world, and then this is what's happening in the world. Recognize that's not a rule. Like it's a nice way of doing it, and lots of people use that way of doing it. It doesn't mean that's how you have to do it, right? You may want to start off with a close-up of rocket wagon like this, right? Maybe this is where we start off, and we're moving really fast with the car, like we're kind of connected with the car. We're seeing like the headlight jiggle, maybe the rocket wagon sign is like wobbling or whatever, and we realize this rocket wagon is moving really quick, right? That's kind of shocking to do it this way, right? It's like if you started off your movie with a close-up on somebody's eye. The reason that's shocking is because like we went from not knowing anything about this to being very, very close to it, right? And that's jarring. It's jolting. So that's why a lot of people start with establishing shots. It's kind of like to ease you into the scene. An example of this that I thought was pretty good is I think it's John Wick 2. If you watch that, at the beginning of it, it's like this establishing shot from above the city. We're really far away, and then we start seeing these cars zooming down the road, right? And then we get closer to the road, and then we just see a crash, like where a motorcycle just crashes into a car, right? And what that does is it establishes this world. There's a big city. Since we know we're watching a John Wick movie, we're like, oh, John Wick is in a car chase, right? So we get these. We get this shot. Maybe this is maybe a little more of what we're wanting to go for to get our subject a little bit more in the foreground, right? So maybe this is what we're going for our second shot. Right, and let's imagine this is a moving camera. The car is moving, the camera is moving with it, but for the most part, it's a mounted camera, and we're able to see, this car in the foreground, this car in the background. This is our a little bit more information about our environment as we pass by it. So, so there's a couple things we need to start thinking about in terms of composition for any of these. The first is our horizon line. Right, so I'm going to draw on the screen here, and I'm going to use a color that's kind of easy to see, I think. There we go. Let's get some red in here so we can see it. So right now our horizon line is here, right? Now what we do with that horizon line really affects the way our camera feels like we are looking, right? So if I deleted that, if I adjusted my camera instead to something like this, right, we are now, our horizon line is higher, right? And that means our camera is higher. The reason we think of our horizon line where it is because of our physical location, like where is your head, right? And if you're standing on something high, looking down, the horizon line will be higher. Right? Versus if we are low, the horizon line will be lower. If I delete that, let's get down here. Something like this, low looking up at the car, our horizon line is lower. Right? Now, these two shots give us a very different interpretation of this scene. This shot has us looking upward at our car. Right? We are kind of low. The car is the hero car here is kind of high, and this is a little bit empowering, right? If we do something like this, we're small. The car is big. We're looking up. We look up at powerful things or strong things, right? And so what this would tell us, this car is high, right? We're looking up at it in relation to it, right? This car is lower. You know, it's not as powerful, right? It's lower in the scene, right? And we got a really low horizon line, meaning we're low and looking up a lot, right? So this shot is sort of empowering, and it's kind of interesting because we got a very rusty, like kind of ragged car, but it tells us that this car is strong, right? Something that the alternative to that is this shot, right? Which tells us, this car is threatening because it's higher. We're kind of looking down at this car here because it's lower in the scene. This may ever so slightly weaken our impression of this car, right? It may make it feel less powerful or more vulnerable by looking up or down. So recognize that all of this is really the location of your horizon line, which says, where is our camera? Right? Is our camera higher than our subject looking down, lower than our subject looking up? Now, a pretty, you all have, I'm sure, heard people go on and on about the rule of thirds. Right? So let's talk about the rule of thirds. Let's just draw them on here really quick. And if I were to draw, sort of subdivide this shot into thirds, something like this. What the rule of thirds is, most people use the rule of thirds for, is to say that these points, right, are good locations to put interesting or important things, right? And so this helps a little bit just to be able to position this, right? That this may be how we want to compose our shot, right? Our red car is along this rule of thirds, right? Our green car is along this rule of thirds. But there's another thing I want you to keep in mind, and that is, where is your horizon line? And something that works really well is to level your horizon line along one of your rules of thirds. So we get something like this, and this is an okay composition now for this shot, right? Let's do that again. Let's draw some more rules of thirds on here really quick. I'm very sloppy with this, but it's okay. Yeah, that one probably wasn't. Those two weren't right. There, right? So if I wanted to do this the other way, I maybe would set it up something like this. Right? Now keep in mind that this doesn't have to be perfectly this has to be right there in the center of that dot, right? These are guides. These are things to say, if you are slightly off, maybe this would look better like this, right? Just so this car lines up with that line, and this car lines up with this line, right? The horizon line one, I think, is one that helps a lot, right? So a lot of things are happening once we do this. You'll see that this building here is completely in this third. That's nice. This car is lining up pretty well here. Maybe I would even position this a little bit to where the most interesting parts to look at are hitting right here, right? But this helps us with a couple of things, right? It helps us to know where our interest is and how to direct our eye, right? So if we have the option to make this a little more interesting, let's say we had I don't know, a moon or something we wanted to put in the scene, right? Maybe we would want to put that up here to like kind of guide our eye down this way or something. I don't know, some clouds, right? So maybe our clouds would do something like this, right, to guide our eye back down toward our car. Right? So this is all just sort of ways we can rough in our composition. It's important to think about these things because if after you've done all this, even if you're lining up with your rule of thirds, if there's big sections that are empty and boring, then it's not going to feel balanced, right? This is definitely not going to feel as balanced like that. Right? This side over here feels much more empty. Right? So if that's the case, maybe we don't use these rule of thirds like that. Maybe we use the rules of thirds like this. So we are balancing this shot as a chase with this car in the foreground a little bit better, and maybe I would, or the background a little bit better, and then maybe I would raise this car up, right? Make it like it's chasing a little higher. We got a little bit more balance in the level of this shot. Okay, we're going to come back here in just in the next video. We're going to talk about cameras. So I'll see you back here in just a bit.